on this episode of the Girl Talk Podcast.
I have found that nobody can contradict your story.
That's 100% true.
So this is what happened to me. This is how Jesus changed me. And so people are more open when you share your story.
Hello there. You are listening to the Girl Talk Podcast. My name is Carol.
I'm Kelly.
I'm Trisha.
And we're so glad you have joined the conversation today. Do you love well when you disagree with somebody? Man alive, we've forgotten how to disagree in our country. There is
We've become keyboard warriors.
Yeah, and there is so much like I'm hatred. I'm going to go so far as to say hatred when people don't agree, and it's concerning to me.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what caused that. Do y'all know?
Well, Kelly said something I think that relates to that. Keyboard warriors.
Oh, yeah.
We can disagree with someone vehemently and not have to look them in the face when we're doing it over technology, social media.
Yeah.
So we're protected. So people will say more than they would say in a face-to-face situation.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think it's we think we're right.
Yeah.
Well,
I think we think we're right, and we have forgotten that we're not the smartest people in the whole wide world. And
I've not forgotten that.
I'm reminded of that on the daily.
Yeah, on the dailies. Me too.
yeah, and we've forgotten how to be kind.
Yes. I think we've stopped prioritizing kindness in our culture.
And we've started treating people the way they're treating us, if we're really honest. You know, there's a lot of people who are screaming hatred at us. And so what do? We scream hatred back. And that is not biblical. It is not helpful. It is not godly. It is not holy. It is wrong in all the ways. And we're human. And so we sin and we trip over ourselves and we say things back that we shouldn't.
I'm gonna make a statement here, and y'all can disagree with me, but
We'll try to do it kindly.
do it kindly.
With love.
I liken this back to when our culture stopped valuing human life.
Okay. Unpack that a little bit more.
So
What does
when
that
we
mean?
stopped valuing human life from conception, I'm not going to make this, this is not a podcast about right to life or any of that, but I will say that as I've thought about it, I just saw a shift when we stopped valuing human life for people to stop valuing each other. Like, because for me, when I talk about that issue, it's a slippery slope. Like, where do you stop with that? And, you know, you see, I watch the news maybe once or twice a year when there's some kind of catastrophic event that I need to know about. You know, if we're preparing for a show or something here, I'll take a look at the news, you know, to make sure I don't need to mention something. But for the most part, I can't even watch the news because I just get so burdened for people. And it's not one of those things I'm going to stick my head in the sand. I still consume news and I still feel like I stay in touch with what I need to stay in touch with. But the very way that we communicate anymore just, I think, must break God's heart.
Yeah.
Because we stopped valuing each other's. You know, I can remember a time where you could sit across a Democrat and a Republican could sit down at a table together, and even though they disagreed, they could enjoy barbecue. You know,
Yeah.
and that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
You know, you won't even be in the same state. Really, you know, if you disagree. And it just is, and I like to say, it's not going to be a political thing, but I just think it goes back a little further to when we stopped valuing human life. That became the thing that, okay, all of a sudden, what you think doesn't matter. And I think you spoke to something too about we're not the smartest, you know, person in the room, or we're not always right. I think there's something to be said for, we haven't known what we've always known. We weren't born knowing what we know today.
Right.
And so we're always learning. That, to me, in and of itself, should be printed on a poster and hung above everybody's head. Because when there are people that we disagree with, we should listen. Because even if it's not the issue that we're talking about or the disagreement that we're having, there's a good chance you can learn something from that person.
Yeah.
And so I just think that there's something to be said for conversations with people we don't agree with. I think iron sharpens iron. In the Bible, it talks about that, and that's talking more of in a spiritual sense. But I think when we don't disagree with people, when we do disagree with people, it kind of broadens our view. And I get so frustrated with myself because sometimes I find myself listening to people to respond instead of listening to people so that I can understand where they're coming from. I get so frustrated with myself because I know I'm doing it. I'm like, stop. Just take the time to listen to what they're saying. Because I believe that if you listen to a person long enough, they'll uncover the real issue, the real thing that they're dealing with. And usually it's not the issue that you're disagreeing over. It's usually a heart issue.
Yeah, just last night, somebody was telling me about a lady named Rosario Butterfield, yes, who, if you're not familiar with that story, she was a professor at Syracuse University, really in charge of their women's studies and LGBTQ issues, and was doing a class or writing a paper or researching a book or something on the religious right and on the conservative viewpoint and the traditional conservatism, and met a guy named Kent Smith.
But she was living in a homosexual relationship too, I think.
Believe so.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And she was like, I want to interview this guy because I need to figure out what the enemy thinks so that I can better counteract it in the stuff that I'm teaching. And he, a solid believer, said, yes, I would love to have conversations with you. Let's get together once a week and go deep in the Bible and let's talk about this. And at the end of it, she's like, I have never had anybody show me such love. I always thought that Christians were about hate, that Christians were about divisiveness, and they hated me. And what I found out is that Christians actually love me, and God is about love. She gave her life to Christ, and now she's married to a pastor, and more people have come to know Christ because of her.
Yeah.
And now she opens up her home and says, I want to have conversations with the misfits of the world, the people who don't believe like I do, the people who are who I disagree with, and I want to show them the love of Christ, so that they can then know about this Jesus that I know about. And what a great example for the rest of us to follow, to be like Rosario and
I think
love people.
Didn't he have her? He and his wife had her over for dinner.
Yeah, I think so.
And I
right.
thought that was, that's a kind of a safe, let me care for you, come have dinner, we can talk. But I love that because it wasn't like a interview or a wagging of the finger. It was, let's break bread together.
Oh, let's break bread together. That's beautiful. That's so biblical.
It is. And have you ever noticed how, like, if you go somewhere and it's not people that, it's not your people, but it's people that you kind of know, once you sit down at a table together, it seems like people drop their defenses for whatever reason. Sure. There's something about the table
coming together in that
environment,
in that
and everybody
situation.
Nourishing themselves. There's, I don't know. I mean, there's
defenses are down.
There's probably some kind of science behind it, but
everybody's on the same level. Nobody's standing up. Everybody's sitting down, sharing things.
Yes.
So there's communion.
Yeah, and so it opens up to great conversation. Now, I'm not a great cook. Unless you talk to Trisha, and she's only had one thing that I've ever made.
She
likes
makes
it.
Delicious this salsa chicken thing.
Yeah,
so good. I love it when she
does
makes it because she gives
and
it to me.
It makes me feel like a world-class chef. But
you are to me, baby.
But I'm learning that hospitality is not always about. I mean, it can be Chinese takeout.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, like
right.
whatever it is.
The act of sitting down with someone.
Because I've always excused myself from that conversation because I'm not a great cook.
Same.
But that's not what it's about at all.
There's a restaurant in Asheville that can help you with that does like a Sunday family dining thing. And you sit down at a table you sign up for it. You have to RSVP, but you sit down at a table with people you don't know.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
And you share family dining style food and meet new people and talk about the interesting food that you're eating, and it's a fancy restaurant, and so there's people from all over that, with Asheville being such a touristy town, there's people from all over.
Fun.
So you get to meet some really fascinating people that just by breaking bread with strangers.
Yes.
That's cool.
Well, in terms of like spending time together sharing a meal, we don't even do that as much as we did as families.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I think what we're seeing, and you alluded to it, we've been talking about it a little bit, is the dehumanizing of the culture. With technology, we don't have to see each other. With even like something like AI starting to get bigger and bigger, it's like, well, let's push the humans out and just get to the information or whatever. We're moving away rapidly from the face-to-face conversations. And I think it would be really good to return to that with strangers, with your family, with your friends. We need that.
We were built for
hard
connection.
wired for it, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially if we have limited time, the times we're going to choose, the people we are going to choose are going to be the people who align with our beliefs, align with our values. And, part of this conversation is also encouraging us to step out of just that safe place and have conversations with people that don't believe like we do, people whose beliefs are polar opposite sometimes to the way the Bible even teaches.
Well, let's talk about how to do that, because for me, you mentioned the safe zone, and that's the case. It feels unsafe for me to do too much talking about my faith. Maybe they're going to get mad at me, or maybe they're, you know what I mean? That there's those fears that crop up. I don't want them to crop up, but they crop up if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
So how do we do that in a way that draws people to us and doesn't push them away?
Well, what's the number one thing people like to talk about?
Themselves.
Yes. What's the best way to get somebody to talk about themselves?
Ask them questions.
Ask them questions.
I like this.
Yes. So don't go into the conversation thinking that you have to own the conversation. If you go into any conversation with a list of questions in your head, don't write them down. That looks awkward.
Question number one,
stranger.
But, the questions.
You can write them on your hand.
Yeah. Little bullet points on the palm of your hand.
And don't ask them questions that they think you're trying to steal their credit card information.
Right, yeah.
What was your family pet growing up?
That's right. Yes.
Your mother's maiden name.
Yeah. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
What brings you joy?
Yeah.
Tell me one thing that brought you joy this week. What's anything that can open up those conversations. No yes, no answers, because that doesn't help with conversations. But people love to talk about themselves. So anytime you can really get them thinking about themselves, talking about themselves, you'll be able to start picking up on little places where you can bring in your faith. You can bring in a story that then points back to Jesus, or you can relate without trying to dominate the conversation, but then building that relationship by pulling out the talking of the other person.
That's good.
Yeah, I would say
listening ears.
I would say the first interaction, you just make it all about them.
Agreed.
First time you sit down, unless they ask you a question about yourself, just be a student of them.
Yeah. So good.
A student of their life, like what they like to do, if they're from here, you just become a student. Here's the thing: when you get ready for a mission trip, what do?
Learn about the culture.
You learn about the culture. You learn about what they eat. You learn about the people.
You get a terrible passport photo.
You get a terrible passport photo. You do all of those things. Think of your next interaction with a stranger as a mission trip.
Oh, that's so good.
Like a mission trip at the grocery store or the church or whatever. Yeah.
One of the quotes I've heard before is that interesting people are interested in others. So be interested in others and you will be found to be interesting also.
Because you're going to stand out. People don't do that.
Yeah.
They're waiting to respond about themselves. So you're going to stand out, which means the light of Christ is going to stand out. When we get the opportunity to share that.
The other thing I like to remember is that God gave us one mouth and two ears. And so we're supposed to listen twice as often as we talk.
And I heard that your mouth closes, but your ears don't.
Yes. Oh, that's so good.
I don't know that mine does. Mine's always open.
I mean, it can.
It can, yeah. It can.
So those listening skills are so important in building relationships and being able to love people that don't believe like we do.
You know, that's cool. My husband has done some prison ministry, and they teach them this phrase. It made me think about it. Listen, listen, love, love. That's their phrase when they go into the prison ministry. Listen, listen, love, love.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind. You can't be patient and kind if all you're doing is talking.
Yes.
That's true.
You know, if you're
Or
listening.
thinking about talking.
Or thinking. That's right.
Yes.
Yes.
Because that is my biggest obstacle, I'll say, is while they're talking, I'm trying to formulate what I'm going to say so I'll sound smart. You know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
takes me a while.
Right. Well, again, because it's all about us.
Yeah.
It gets back to our pride, our sin
Yeah.
of pride issues. And instead of really just
Self-centered.
laying all of that down and saying, I'm going to really be interested in you.
Yeah.
I'm going to lean in and I'm going to be interested. I want to know who you are.
It's valuing others above yourself.
Yeah.
Right. It's valuing humanity
Yes.
and knowing that God, they're made in God's image, just like you're made in God's image.
Yes.
And they have something valuable to contribute to this world, just like you do. And it's finding out that it's like a scavenger hunt. You know, find out more about them with your eyes wide open.
Yeah. Such good stuff.
Especially if they believe differently than you.
Yeah.
So that's very good.
And I think that, you know, I think back to my own experience, and I grew up in church. The pastor came over to my house and told me about salvation. I said yes. And, you know, it wasn't like I had this great big testimony before I said yes to Jesus. But I think about the church as a whole, and I think we've siloed ourselves so much that a lot of times we don't even step outside the church to have relationship with people who aren't believers. I think that's dangerous
Yeah.
for two reasons. I think the first reason is the Great Commission is to go and make disciples. The other thing is I think that we sometimes need to hear what the world thinks of believers, and we need to be students of that as well. Because, you know, it's the example that you brought up of Rosaria Butterfield. She had an idea of what she thought Christians were and how divisive and hateful they were. And so we need to take note of those things and allow God to use us in those areas to love well in those places. But I think sometimes the scary non-believers, you know, we don't want to go and talk with them and have conversation with them. And, you know, one of the easiest things I think is to say, can I pray for you? I mean, that just breaks down so many walls. I've done that a lot with, you know, you go in a restaurant or something and, waitress comes up and says, you know, what can I get you to drink? And you say, hey, we're getting ready to pray in just a second. Is there anything we can pray about for you? Yeah. I've had people say no. I've had people say, please pray for me. And then they share something about their lives, and it starts a conversation that goes on throughout the whole meal. So there are different ways to do it, but I just don't think that we can, you know, me and my four no more ourselves into Christianity and stop having relationships with people outside the faith. Most of the yelling and screaming that we see on TV is because people don't take the time to get to know each other. They just assume the worst based on their position.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it too, part of the reason why we don't want to have conversations with unbelievers is that we don't feel like we have all the answers.
That is true.
Yeah.
And so it becomes an insecurity thing of what if they ask a question and I don't know the answer?
Yeah.
Or what if they sway my opinion? What if my theology is so weak that they're able to convince me that, you know,
Ask you a
whatever.
question that makes you doubt.
That makes you doubt, right? Am I really strong enough? And, you know, I think part of getting over that is being able to say, first of all, Jesus is with me in every conversation, and I don't have to know all of the answers to all of the questions.
Yes.
It's, I don't. It's fine to say I don't know the answer to that. Hey, why don't we look at that together? You know, why don't we study our Bible together? And
Or for you to go find help from a pastor or a trusted spiritual
somebody who does know the answer.
leader. Yes, somebody who does know the answer, who can help you understand it. So then you can say, hey, can we get back together?
Right.
You know, and I will say this, if your theology is weak in an area, that is an area that you need to firm up, for lack of a better word, that you need to take a good look at, that you need to say, oh, here's a place, because if that person challenges you and you feel like, ooh, that's a weak place in my theology, if they don't attack you there, and why should they? Because you're just getting to know them. The devil will.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be a place. So you know?
Yeah, but don't let your own insecurities be the reason why you don't go and have a conversation with somebody.
Yes.
Whatever your insecurity is, whether it's the insecurity of not knowing the answer or the insecurity of having a weak faith, just still go.
Yeah.
Still go.
Yeah. And I have found that nobody can contradict your story.
That's 100% true.
So this is what happened to me. This is how Jesus changed me. Nobody's going to say that didn't happen because it did.
Yeah.
And so people are more open when you share your story.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think the whole laying the groundwork, and some people would say this manipulative, but I don't think it is, because you truly are showing an interest in them. I'm not saying that you develop an interest in them for your own benefit so that you can do whatever you want to, share your faith with them. You get to know them because they're interesting and they're different, or y'all have a kid that plays ball on the same team or is in the band or whatever the case may be. You get to know them out of a general love for people, because God will put that in your heart.
Yes.
If you ask for it. And then I just would say, don't rush it. Don't push it. Just let it happen organically. Don't be afraid to say something when God provides you the opportunity. But I will say 90% of the times I'm like, oh man, I wish I had waited, because they went on to reveal something that was I felt like more of an open door, and I'd already botched it from the beginning. God doesn't need us. He chooses to use us in these interactions. Yeah. And so wait for him, ask for his guidance and his wisdom as you talk with people and build relationships, because you never know. I had worked with somebody for a really long time, and this was in a secular workplace, and they had some kind of tragedy happen in their lives. And I had never once pushed Jesus on them. We had just worked together, and they knew I was a person of faith, but it just really, we never just interacted. And they went through some kind of tragedy, and they called me the first night that this had happened and asked me to pray for them. And that was the opportunity that I had to kind of walk alongside them through that. And they ended up becoming a believer because of this tragic situation that happened. And so don't be afraid, but also don't think it's all up to you, because it's not.
Yeah.
God is doing a work, and he can do much more and fill your mouth with things you're like, there have been conversations I've had, I'm like, I don't even know where that came from. I didn't even know that before I said it. And yes, it is true. And that was totally God, because I'm not that smart,
So therefore you didn't botch it up, as you said earlier.
Well, but I have plenty of times. My goodness gracious.
But God uses it.
Right.
Even our fumblings, he uses. And especially if we're sharing his love, he's going to use whatever fumblings we have.
Sure. And sometimes it's not about the words that you use, but the actions.
Yeah.
If you don't have the words, you don't have to feel like you've got to say the words.
Right.
Just be there with somebody in their time of need and listen.
Absolutely.
To them and let them talk.
Absolutely. If you have ideas or suggestions about how to love well when you disagree with somebody, we would love to hear those. You can always email us at girltalk@thelightfm.org. We do a little happy dance every time we get an email. It's so much fun. We love hearing from you. You can check in on the Girl Talk Facebook page, also on the Girlfriends of the Girl Talk podcast page. We would love to interact with you. And we'll see you next time we gather around these microphones for the next Girl Talk podcast.